All right. Hello there. Feel free to say hello in the chat if you're watching this nonsense already. I want to make sure that, I turned off the mute button and everyone can see the ridiculous nonsense before we begin. Hey, we have at least one person here saying hello. We take what we can get. Let's see here. Do I have the Twitch app installed on my phone? We'll get started soonish. Let's see here. Oh, good, good, good. We have a couple of people watching already. Spectacular. Good, good, good. Is expected to be ridiculous, and I'd better not disappoint. Well, we'll see. We'll give people a minute or two to dive in. Make sure you stay hydrated. It's critically important as we're going out into the wild here. We have nothing to bring. We don't really bring a lot with us. It's all about surviving on our wits. All right. This should be fun. Good, good, good. All right, we'll mention them again. Let's see. Let's pull this nonsense up and talk a little bit about what it is we're hoping to achieve. We'll leave in a minute or two, but first, welcome to Basecamp. Specifically, if I can learn to type properly, Honeycomb, who is sponsoring this ridiculous nonsense. And they're our Basecamp today. Not Basecamp in the sense of the deeply problematic company, but rather a Basecamp in the sense of a place where it's safe, where people are not going to eat us alive. And as we wander through the virtual expo, I warn you, understand that we are visitors to their natural habitat. These companies are not used to our presence, so I assure you, they are more scared of us than we are of them. But we have to be respectful of their habitat. We cannot let them become dependent upon us. So as we go through, make sure that you don't let anyone scan your badge. Otherwise, they're not going to know how to survive without us. Take only pictures and leave. Only forlorn people attempting and failing to give you a business card. Remember, we're visitors there. Now, Honeycomb does observability, but not observability in the sense of hipster monitoring. Observability in the sense of actually understanding what's going on inside of your environment. And folks have decided they're going to more or less co-opt that at other vendors because they buy us for different things, like rebadging what they've already built instead of redefining something new, or optimizing for getting yelled at on Twitter by charity majors, as people tend to do. They call it different things like AI ops of, the computer is going to tell you what's important inside of your environment. Yeah, that's going to be a recurring theme of bullshit inside of this nonsense. So my thanks as we begin to our friends at Honeycomb, because there is more yet to come, and it's going to be, if nothing else, wonderful. Feel free to ask questions in the chat as we go, because this is going to be awesome. Now, last year I did something very similar to this, and I expected to get a giant pile of complaints from people, like, since I'm insulting their companies as we go. And instead I got the last thing I could ever have expected, which is, of course, thank you notes. Thank you for paying attention to what we're doing, because AWS at no point appears to have promoted the virtual expo in any way, shape, or form. You could be forgiven, in fact, for not knowing there was a virtual partner expo whatsoever. But that's not really my problem. That's someone else's problem. Now, if you log into the virtual reInvent site, for which, of course, you must register, but don't worry, I got you on this, you can see all kinds of different things that are on demand. It's not the same as the in-person site. It's completely separate, and ne'er between the two shall meet, but it's great. And if you click on this whole window of things to look at, you scroll down all the way down past, the misspelling of the word heroes as we go, because, yeah, that's right. Security is job 0, spelling is 0 F's given. And scroll down, hidden under Partner Solutions. There's a preview that does nothing. The thing we're actually looking for here is Browse Partners by topic. And then we look at this and we wait and we wait and we wait. And here we are. Terrific. And we see a whole bunch of filter by interest. And you try and look at these things and find those interests. Hang on, let me turn off that obnoxious light behind me. Okay, so as we wind up looking at this, we see it's sorted in no particular order because it's sort of alphabetical, but sort of not. The sorting algorithm is in fact based upon which has spent the most money. There are different partnership tiers in different ways. You can filter by interest, ranging from architecture to compute to absolute bullshit. But that's okay. We're going to look at these things as we see them. And we're going to visit and explore what all of these different things are and what they do and how they do it. So feel free as we look through these to wind up calling out specific things we should visit. But let's begin. We're going to start with Datadog, which has long been a top tier AWS sponsor. In person at reInvent, it's great because as we're packing up and leaving, folks in the rodeo are coming into town and they have no idea what all this enterprise nonsense is, since this is basically their only time off the ranch all year long. So you get great comments like, dog? Oh my God, George, that's disgusting. And it's really not worth fixing this. That is the best kind of problem, someone else's. We look into what Datadog does, and they try and tell all kinds of different stories, but yeah, if it does monitoring, that's basically what they do. In practice, what they really do is have amazingly targeted badge scanners for just about everything. Now, we see down here in the corner, connect with sponsors. That's the thing we're avoiding, and which will lead them to become dependent upon us and to feed their ecosystem, and that's terrible. So we're going to close that out. Now, Datadog spends an extortionate pile of money to be near the top. That's great. Now, it's very important that AWS call out that, whoa, this is on our website, but the content has been provided by someone else. Anything that they say is no way sponsored, endorsed, supported. We just took their money. We don't know what they're going to say, do, or achieve. And it's incredibly important from AWS that this is offset in a far more visually attractive thing than anything else you'll see in these booths. Why? Because enterprise marketing. It's lovely. We take a look at what they actually do, and you click the giveaways button, and then they do the smart thing and drag you over to their microsite here. This is where they can actually, engage with you outside of the confines of giant disclaimers from cloud companies. Good for them. You can win things you might most likely already have, etc., etc. Great. This is all basically a very beautifully laid trap so they can do the digital equivalent of scanning your badge. Again, I cannot stress this enough. Don't let them. So as we go back out of here, we look at other things too. Accenture, they're most famous for both blocking me on Twitter as well as effectively, screwing up a bunch of cloud migrations for various folks. Accenture is one of those giant consultancies that winds up fixing the problems that they see that their enterprise customers have. Unfortunately, the problem that they see is way too much money and not enough judgment in how to spend it. You hear a lot of stories about Accenture, but funnily enough, none of those stories ever seem to result in a better outcome for the customer. However, there are execs who will say beautiful things about them. 2 years later, you'll find that they have a new job at Accenture as a partner. You can draw your own conclusions from that. Deloitte is similar in some respects, other than the fact that if you go to the Deloitte website, in fact, let's visit here and see what they tell us to do. We go to Contact Us, right? So we're going to hit that button and go over here. And you notice their subdomain is www2. They're here to help you with your digital transformation, but nothing says we suck at digital transformation like having a subdomain of www2. Again, we can draw our own conclusions as we proceed. All right, here we have Intel, which is funny because Intel had absolutely no presence whatsoever at physical reInvent. I assume they're following their own roadmap stuff, so they're showing up in Las Vegas to unpack to present at reInvent next week. It's fun because we're big partners and proud of our relationship with AWS. And then the next AWS talk is here's how we built Graviton 2. It kicks the living shit pile out of everything everything that Intel's ever done. Yeah, pretty much. And this pop-up keeps coming back of click to engage. Yes, I'm aware. Thank you for telling me. If it weren't for the constant pop-ups, I might think that this horrible different cacophony of colors and sounds was in fact the AWS console. Over here we have VMware, of course. The payday lender of technical debt is half of their old company, but they're also have a new cloud-native thing, which is basically comprised of acquiring anything that holds still long enough, sometimes calling it observability, but unlike Honeycomb, having no idea what it means, and then strapping it all together with this idea of this is what the future looks like. Sadly, it's probably going to work solely because companies have no idea what it looks like to go from on-prem data centers into cloud. In practice, their big problem in data centers is that their staff sucks at replacing failed hard drives. If that's your problem, then yeah, going to AWS is the way to go, or any cloud provider for that matter. VMware solves the problem of how do we do that without changing a single goddamn thing other than that. VMware, VM here. Take a look here over at the chat here. Do I have any questions on this? Great. I wish I had the lack of fear Corey does to get retargeted in ads for the next 6 months from all these vendors he's clicking on, considering most of these vendors have hostile marketing practices. Yeah, there's a reason I register for all of these things with a tagged email address, and it's great. After a little while, I get annoyed enough to wind up having an autoresponder set up that adds them to my own drip campaigns outbound. Like, it looks like you're trying to build top-of-funnel lead flow. How about you go ahead and solve that problem by sponsoring my ridiculous nonsense? True, it's more expensive than sponsoring the AWS Virtual Expo, but on balance, it works. Thanks again to Honeycomb for sponsoring this ridiculous nonsense. Over here, we have MongoDB, another Emerald tier sponsor because they're running out of ridiculous gems and whatnot. I'm sure next year's top tier will be Chrysanthemum or something like that. MongoDB had a long reputation for losing data in production. Then they hired their chief marketing officer and Matt Acey and a few other folks out of AWS. And now who's the one losing critical things from production? That's right, not Mongo anymore. More to come from them in the next year or two, I would assume. They've really turned over a new leaf. But again, it is exquisitely clear that this is from AWS. The content has been provided by Mongo. In no way, shape, or form should you trust them. Thanks for your money. Yeah, I've never really understood the idea of, taking money from companies and then stabbing them in the face, but that's probably why I'm not an enterprise cloud provider. We move on. A Cloud Guru, now a Pluralsight company. You can rephrase that to a cloud guru, parentheses, a shadow of what it once was. Once upon a time, a Linux Academy bought Jupiter Broadcasting, a small Linux podcasting network type of thing. And then Linux Academy was acquired by A Cloud Guru. A Cloud Guru has just been acquired by Pluralsight, and they themselves are in the process of Pluralsight of being acquired by Vista Equity Partners. So I'm sure that this is just going to have a super positive outcome down the road for customers and the rest. Yeah, we're going to leave that there. I would also probably should stop here at this point and say an awful lot of these companies have sponsored me in the past. They are not sponsoring this particular event because they are not Honeycomb, but honestly, you can buy my attention, but not my opinion. This is why sponsors cycle, and that was incredibly offensive. We're not going to do business with you until next quarter is a very common thing here. It's okay. It's what we do. Here we have AMD, also known as Intel, if Intel knew how to read a calendar. AWS has long been positioning their AMD instances as, if you want Intel stuff and you don't give a shit about performance, but you want it to be cheap, go with AMD. The problem is that narrative is falling down because AMD's stuff is actually pretty awesome since they can deliver according to what they're expected to deliver and not, make insulting ads that are promoted on Twitter that are basically getting salty toward Apple for deciding there might be a better way than shipping laptops with 4-year-old performance for 2 years in the future prices. Something inflation. We have a bunch of companies whose names I do not know that I'm not going to dive too far into, solely because it really comes down to a point of I don't inadvertently want to crap all over a 5-person company. Counterpoint, if you're a 5-person company and you're sponsoring Virtual reInvent, it's okay. We all make horrible blunders when starting out a company. Just don't make this one again. My God. Okay, as we continue to move on here, let's see. Atlassian, that's right. This is fantastic for those of us who have ADHD, because with Atlassian, I want to go ahead and track this task, so I want to add it to Jira. But by the time Jira loads, I've already moved on and forgotten what task I was trying to track down. This is how I keep my backlog slim. It's amazing. They wound up looking at Trello and seeing that Trello was getting a lot of business, and they said, the big problem here that we see in the market and the missing opportunity that Trello has is that they're not completely shitty, so we can buy them and fix that. So they did. Now there's really no good task management system that isn't shitty in the enterprise space. Asana is on the rise, and it seems to be doing super well. I like using them. I can't wait for Atlassian to acquire them too and make them shitty. We'll check the chat as well here. Good, good, good. Oh, people seem to be enjoying this. Refin Peace had to leave. Make sure not to. Oh, he has to run and feed the wildlife. No, don't do that. Oh my God, no, don't feed the wildlife. We've been over this. Let's continue and see how this continues to wind up causing problems for everyone, specifically me and the people who, sell sponsorships on my side. Because if there's one thing they love, it's having to apologize to a whole bunch of sponsors after I finish one of these. Here we have Auth0, which is bold enough to answer the question, what would Amazon Cognito be like if it weren't completely shitty? They are currently in the process of, validating Cognito's market for them. And Okta looked at this and said, nothing gold can stay, and then acquired them. So we can just wait to see what this turns into down the road. You can tell that Okta has a sterling reputation in the space because post-acquisition, during a current event that they're sponsoring, the word Okta appears absolutely nowhere on this page. It's always great when a company acquires you, and when you look at that company's brand, you feel deeply ashamed and never want to mention it to anyone ever again. See also Media Temple being acquired by GoDaddy. Let's move on. Let's see. We have things like Big ID and Bitdefender. I don't know who those things are. Braze, same type of story. Capgemini is another story. It's similar to what we saw further up the page with Accenture and Deloitte, but they're not that tier of partner because they're enterprisey and they're going to take your money, but they're going to give less of the money that they take over to AWS. Good for them. Here we have Capital One. Capital One. Oh, this is smarter than when you click that, it goes to the actual Capital One website and not some giant disclaimer-ridden piece of nonsense. This is very well thought through. Good for them. It's a microsite that lives here. Capital One. Do you know what's in your wallet? That's right. It's a hand that isn't yours. Whose hand is it? AWS. Probably because yet again, they've tricked us into running a managed NAT gateway somewhere we shouldn't have. Now we're paying through the freaking nose or a worse orifice, depending on who you are, and having to give it to Amazon in return for nothing. Once you realize, I can turn on a S3 endpoint in that subnet and drop that to 0, their response is not, oh God, we're sorry, here's a refund. It's, you caught us. What are you gonna do? Yeah, the managed NAT gateway has no fans, nor should it. Here we have an old sponsor, Chaos Search. I like what they do. They dare to answer the question, what if Elasticsearch or OpenSearch or whatever they're calling it this month wasn't completely shitty? The idea being that they wind up storing your data in your own S3 buckets with their own proprietary compression algorithm. Yes, this is in fact the plot of Silicon Valley, but roll with it. And then just searched it in place rather than moving it around all the time, having to manage infrastructure yourself. And it's really kind of awesome. Now it speaks SQL because of course it does. Everything speaks SQL in the fullness of time. Machine learning analytics. Does that mean anything? No. But if you use that term, apparently, it gives you a gold star in enterprise procurement departments. I have no idea why companies say these things, but they do. I must be missing a plot somewhere. I'm not one to judge out loud. Let's see. Comments here. Let's see. I've never disagreed more about Asana. Okay, well, that's cool. You're allowed to. Whatever happened to that hacking case from the former insider at Cap One? That was actually an interesting breach story. Great question. They were breached by a former AWS employee who wound up exploiting a bunch of stuff, but it was chained vulnerabilities together. This was actually kind of well done. It wasn't, whoop-de-doo, we forgot to secure an S3 bucket, hurt. No, this was a matter of privilege escalation and a pivot somewhere else. Did Capital One make mistakes? Absolutely. But they were not the glaringly obvious mistakes that, Microsoft Azure bakes in from the very beginning. Let's move on. Here we have Checkpoint Software Technologies. What do we know about Checkpoint? They used to be a firewall company back when the word firewall was a hard requirement in the name of your company or talk if you wanted to give a talk at RSA conference. They eventually broadened that out and realized, we've got to basically tell a different story. The old Checkpoint story was kind of neat because they sold software that ran firewalls, but you had to buy commodity hardware yourself off the shelf to run it. It seems that this was waiting for cloud. Now they can put AMIs in the marketplace, sell it to you there, and supposedly do things beyond that, but who knows? We know that they sell to enterprises and governments, which is code for bring money and lots of it. Let's see here. Yeah, some of these are just interesting and odd. Here we have Cloud Academy. I'd never really heard of them before. And then they wound up doing some work in the community for AWS and I became aware of them. And then they started sponsoring and I became very aware of them. And it's, this is the answer now to, what would I do if I want to learn cloud, and because the answer just became a very big version of do not go with a cloud guru for blindingly obvious reasons, as Vista Equity Partners eats the fish that ate the fish that is being digested. Yeah, it's great. Once again, AWS would like to stop and warn us that nothing here is something they're ever going to stand behind. Yeah, I don't have to put disclaimers like that in the things that I sponsor because I make it a point to talk to the sponsors before taking their money to make sure that they're not complete shitheels. This is apparently a relic of a business era long past. AWS laughs in my face and sells shitty things. Oh, someone's asking what happened to ACG. They must have joined somewhat later. Yeah, they got acquired by Pluralsight, who's getting acquired by Vista Equity Partners, which means there has never been a better time to no longer be one of their customers, given the option. Let's move on. Cloudera. It just basically sounds like we're going to put the word cloud at the front of something and call it good. Cockroach Labs. They're interesting. If when all your databases are gone, Cockroach is presumably the last thing standing. It is presumably a distributed SQL database. In practice, no one I'm aware of offers it as a managed first-party service, so most people ignore it entirely. Let's face it, AWS offers 40 managed database services, and why would you pick something that wasn't managed and available from them? Yeah, I love their new managed database service they announced at Reinvent because there wasn't one. Let's move on. Device 42. Oh, wow, those folks are still around. Okay, this is awesome. Back in the days of data center world, where they did inventory management of what the hell is going on in your data center. Who has what IP address? Which server is in which rack? That kind of nonsense. They're apparently doing something now in the world of cloud, but they have a big competitor in this space. That's right, Microsoft Excel, because that's what everyone uses badly to tell that story. I hope they're doing well. I actually used to like those folks. If you work there and you hear this, let me reach out. Let me know what their story is these days. Ah, yes, F5 Networks, named after the fact that their interfaces have been so shitty for so long, you're constantly refreshing what the hell their interface is in the web page, hoping it works this time by pressing the F5 button. They're now most famously known as that company that used to make things you cared about, but now they bought Nginx. So that's right, they acquired an open source web server product and hope to make up the free price tag in volume. Someone said, yes, they did join late. There we are. Yes. Justin Broadley points out there was an $80 million fine to Capital One. Yeah. Honestly, you look at the stock price of someone who gets a company gets breached, and then a year later, it's way higher. So there really is no long-term consequence for this. Sure, they fire their CISO or sometimes an intern. Like the ablative intern problem of blaming them and letting them go out like SolarWinds did is a very common and shitty pattern. If SolarWinds is foolish enough to put themselves in my path, we'll get there. Here we have two options here. GitHub or GitHub, depending, which was an open source darling for a long time. Now they've just cleaned house of executive leadership, so I'm sure they're going to be less Microsofty now. Wink, nudge. But yeah, everyone knows who GitHub is. If not, one wonders in what cave you've been hiding. Or you're a true open source host-it-yourself zealot, which brings us over to GitLab, right next to them. That's right. They're also doing the whole microsite thing, except they didn't even bother with a microsite. Good for you. People who attend reInvent are basically a subset of your entire industry, so at least just drive them the other stuff. They're now a DevOps platform. No, you're not. You're a free Git repository salesperson. Let's not kid ourselves. Everyone uses them for something because they're great. It's Git. You know Git, right? Of course you don't. Nobody knows Git. That's the entire point of Git. It makes you feel dumb. That's its primary purpose because, Linus Torvalds wrote it. Here we have Goldman Sachs and Company. Unless you work in finance, you don't actually know what Goldman Sachs does, but that doesn't stop you from hating them. Because the entire point of finance is to basically paint a giant target on themselves. They're not doing themselves any favors by now. We're going to partner with AWS, a second thing nobody understands, and create a financial cloud for data. What the hell's a financial cloud for data? No one knows. We just know that it means bring money, all the money, to the cloud. Adam Selipsky had these folks on stage to talk a little bit about what happened. 2 years ago, Andy Jassy had David Solomon, the CEO of Goldman Sachs, on stage to talk about cloud. No, of course not. To wind up playing the opening DJ mix at the keynote. You'd think I'm kidding, but I swear to you I'm not. That is a thing that happened. It was not a fever dream. We all have our hobbies. Apparently DJing is one of his. Yes, yes, yes. Someone said, did their CISO have a degree in basket weaving, though? Yeah, I don't actually care about credentialism on stuff like this. I just care that, they know what they're doing. That's a whole separate argument. Here we have the absolute last company you would expect to see here, IBM. Oh, is that because IBM Cloud is a competitor to AWS? Absolutely not. It's because they're IBM and they haven't been relevant since the 80s. When people make jokes about IBM's dress code and they say that we haven't had that mandatory suit and tie dress code for 30 years. Yeah, no one's thought about you for 30 years. There's a reason. They have an IBM Cloud option that attempts to compete with basically, I don't know, the kid ripping the power outlet out of the wall. And they're also a premier consulting partner. They also have this whole Kyndryl thing, which is so broke it can't afford vowels, but okay, it's like the Irmathorn Kyndryl. I don't know what they're trying to be, but it's not going super well for them. Good luck. IBM's the kind of company that one day is going to go out of business, but some of their divisions won't realize it for another 5 years afterwards. Let's continue. Here we have Infosys. I don't comment on Infosys because my wife works there, and honestly, I'm not brave enough to play with that kind of fire. I just appreciate the fact that back when I was trying to figure out whether I could turn this into something or whether I had to do a whole bunch of apologizing, change my name, and get a real job, that they were at least kind enough to, through my wife, cover my health insurance. So yeah, not touching that particular fire. We thank them for, making this all possible. Here we have Instana, which is awesome. It's an observability platform, except it's not. How do we know it's not real observability? Because in very fine print here, it says an IBM company, and there is nothing even slightly modern about IBM, except we're looking for various buzzwords here. The team that built Instana was awesome, and then IBM bought them, and I stopped caring about Instana because, once again, IBM bought them. There's really no nice way to frame that, but here we are. Iron Mountain is famous for basically showing up at your data center with a big truck and shoving tapes into it and then storing them and giving you those tape backups when you needed them after, your data center accidentally burned to the ground. They also did shredding as well, and you really, really, really don't want to confuse those two trucks ever. Pro tip. We continue to move on. Jabra, but the headset company? No. What the Christ is this? Yep, it's the headset company. Cool. They're sponsoring this because someone got extremely confused. It was a corp dev deal and has absolutely no idea which branch of Amazon this is. That is patently adorable. Here we have MariaDB that competes against RDS, the MariaDB version, which was just awesome. Here we have NetApp, which is increasingly S3 in the cloud, sort of. We move on. Netcracker Technology, one has never heard of. Great. Here we have Nutanix. That's right. They're famous for hyperconverged infrastructure. What the hell is that? Nobody even knows because that's one of those terms that only they use, and they say that we're the leader in hyperconverged infrastructure. I, too, am a leader in things I completely made up and pulled wholesale out of my ass. But it turns out that's not nearly as impressive if you can't have Gartner mention it in a magic quadrant somewhere. Here we have NVIDIA. They provide graphics cards that go to machine learning dreamers, gamers, and blockchain shitheads. They're also currently in the process of failing to acquire ARM. Oh, someone says hyperconverge means you can delete things on a lot of computers very fast. Good, good, good. Here we have Anika. They are a fantastic systems integrator and a lot of great people work there. And then they were bought by Rackspace Technology, which means you don't need to think about them ever again because there's a future of technology and there's a past of technology. And Rackspace is the past of technology. They are a cat stuck on the wrong side of the public market door where they go to private equity and then go public again, and then get brought private and then go out again. And every time it basically gives the public investors an opportunity to participate in private equity's losses. 5 years ago, there were 17 pages on their reference customer list. Today, there are 5, if memory serves correctly. And they haven't changed the format of that any. No, just no one is a happy Rackspace customer if they can at all avoid it. In fact, in the cloud economics world, whenever I see someone running a subset of instances on RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, which costs more money, you ask why. Oh yeah, we forgot about that. It's because we used to do business with Rackspace and they made us do it, but we're not there anymore because Rackspace. Yeah, let's fix that. It's an easy win for almost everyone. People at Annika are nodding their heads saying, yeah, absolutely. People at Rackspace are saying, hey, that's not funny once someone winds up recording this video and mailing it to them on VHS. Blockbuster is closed. How are they even going to get a copy? All right, here we have PagerDuty that fights the sysadmin's natural predator. That's right, sleep. This is nice of them. It's one of their sites, but it is a microsite hosted thing that doesn't have the AWS disclaimer. It says go over to the booth, which the second week, okay, that's great. The only people this late to things are IBM, so bless their heart, and Intel. But yeah, more or less the tagline for PagerDuty is wake up, asshole, because you're sleeping, but your site's on fire. One of my favorite things about doing what I do is that I have absolutely no on-call responsibilities whatsoever in my current company, so I don't have to think about this ever again. The best kind of problems are truly someone else's. Here we have Red Hat. You know, they did a better job than Instana by getting acquired by IBM because the word IBM does not appear in the Red Hat logo in quite the same way. Red Hat's argument has been that, oh, we are absolutely not letting IBM change our culture. We're changing IBM's culture. This is living proof that people are always willing to lie to themselves if it's news that they don't want to hear. I used to have a lot of respect for Red Hat. Truly, I did. And they're doing interesting things in interesting ways, but they're becoming increasingly IBM'd by the day. I mean, Rosa's not horrible for what it is, the Red Hat OpenShift service on AWS, but honestly, it really feels like they're still targeting a market that is in decline rather than an advanced one. That's kind of sad. Not everything is what we would hope it would be. Let's see. Over here we have SAP, which is what you are if you wind up spending those kinds of prices. They're the reason, incidentally, that AWS offers instances with 18 to 24 terabytes of RAM on it, which are about as expensive as you would expect, with the caveat that compared to the SAP HANA license for what the thing on top of it's running, you don't even notice that anymore. Yeah. Here we have Select Star, which is exactly how I wind up doing every SQL query ever. Hey-oh, and I bet that's where the joke comes from. Click read more and it doesn't work. That's kind of awesome. Yeah. All right then. Apparently not a web design shop. This is why you don't use the Insight thing. You drive them to your own website where sensible things work. Here we have Slack Technologies. They dare to answer the question, what if Microsoft Teams didn't suck? Then what if we completely failed to evolve our product in any meaningful way, failed to respond to the public markets, and now I guess we're a Salesforce company? That's a thing that happens. Here you have Slalom. They're a consulting company that does a more localized model because they know the area and the terrain and can guide you sweetly down the mountain into the trees. That might be a Sonny Bono joke for which I will later have to apologize. Smarsh is something I haven't dealt with in a long time since I wound up working in a regulated environment. They hook into various social media things for when you're in regulated environments so people can see what you're DMing people. Because if you're doing insider trading, you're probably doing it on the internet and not, a phone call. But okay, let's suspend our disbelief, and that is the way our markets are currently regulated. Don't look too closely at that, or the whole economy comes tumbling down. Here we have Snowflake, which is in the process of validating the living shit out of Amazon Redshift's entire market. Because it turns out that you could use Redshift to do some of these things, except then you'd be using Redshift instead of something good. So people instead go to Snowflake. This makes Amazon Redshift's product team excruciatingly angry. So what does Amazon do about it? That's right, continues to cast low-key shade while doing a tremendous amount of work with Snowflake at the same time. And they're doing all kinds of stuff to improve the capabilities of Redshift without actually making it good as far as the people who actually use it care. Here we have Cynic, or Cynic, or Snike, or Sneak, because they've raised an absolute shit ton of money on the public markets, but have not used any of it to buy a vowel, which would really help with that whole pronunciation thing. They focus primarily on security and scanning things and, ideally getting the hell out of your way. Credit where due. I've looked at their website before, and you know what they don't do? That's right, attempt to scare the living piss out of us in order to get us to buy things. I clicked here's some giveaways, and it dropped me instead to other people's websites. Great. Cool. This is an example of AWS not giving the slightest shit about its partners/sponsors/patsies. This is why I'm not an AWS partner, among many other reasons. Let's see. Here's a good one. Back in the 20th century, there was a massive shift in the world geopolitical situation. Suddenly, monarchies were in decline as democracy took hold around the world. This meant a dramatic decline in the availability of various princesses to kidnap and hold for ransom. This has proved a bit of a problem for Splunk's model, because it turns out that running on burning piles of money is sort of how Splunk has been built from the very beginning. There are other companies like Sumo Logic, also known as Diet Splunk, which we see down below, who love to sit here and wind up giving, for example, unsolicited advice to Adam Silipsky how to run AWS and all kinds of other nonsense. But, these are the worlds in which we live. I seem to recall that they wound up getting acquired by someone one of these days, but I don't recall for the life of me who. Who did Sumo Logic get acquired by, or am I completely misremembering? Yeah, I think I'm misremembering. Terrific. Also, that's right, they bought Sensu. They're on the other side. They're the daddy in the acquisition story. There we are. Sorry, it's a big industry, and sometimes this stuff just hemorrhages right out the back of my head. Believe me, I wish I could forget, but it always comes back around again. Here we have Stripe, an API for money, which is pretty awesome. They do an awful lot of interesting stuff, but why they're bothering to sponsor this from an AWS perspective, I couldn't tell you. I strongly suspect it's a hiring play, because if there's one place you can find unhappy people who are looking for new jobs, it's at AWS itself, and there sure were an awful lot of them roaming around. Now, the virtual thing is kind of a weird thing to sponsor, because I'm pretty sure we're the only people to visit these websites, and my email inbox is going to be a horrifying graveyard by the time all is said and done. But there you go. Here we have Timescale, a company that dares to answer the question, what if Amazon TimeStream had launched, years closer to its announcement than when it actually launched? That's right, it's not vaporware, it's a different kind of time series database. Do you need a time series database? Absolutely not. But if you do, they're a company that is willing to sell one to you. They're also apparently willing to wind up doing most of their blog posts shitting on their competition, which is why I have a dim view of them. Influx Data doesn't tend to do this, which is why, rare among database companies, I have some respect for those folks. Here we have Trend Micro, antivirus for cloud. That's right. The fact that you still think about the antivirus in the context of cloud whenever you hear their name shows that their brand has not kept up with the evolution of the world. The exception to this, of course, is Mark Nunikoven, one of their VPs who has since gotten the hell out and now works over at Lacework instead, solving problems for a different generation and decade and company. Yeah. Turbonomic was a blast too, but an IBM company. That is not an advertisement. That is a warning label. Be aware. Let's see, check the comments now, because it's been a little while since I looked at this. Good. Making jokes about hyperconvergence, making jokes about me. That's right. That's right. Rackspace occupies an abandoned mall in San Antonio, and that about sums up the company. I always thought that was kind of awesome, and then it just got depressing and sad and a relic of a bygone era. Yeah. Yeah, Splunk's the other SAP. It needs the same servers as HANA. That is horrifying. All right. Here's Verizon. Yeah, Verizon does a lot of interesting things with AWS, like, wavelength. Do you know what the hell wavelength is? Of course you don't. Neither does Verizon. I see a whole bunch of stories about it that are written in high enterprise, which is a particular flavor of corporate bullshit, but no one yet has sat down and bothered to explain to me what I, as a potential customer, would pay them to solve for me. It becomes, fun and ridiculous. Hey, Justin Brody points out that IBM is single-handedly keeping reInvent in the green with all these subsidiary sponsorships. They are thrashing around trying to buy anything that holds still long enough, and, I wish them well. A lot of people need exits, and they seem to be providing them. Here we have Veeam, the company that dares to answer the question, what if AWS backup didn't suck and was less back the fuck up, and a lot more about let's actually solve your data protection problems. It's kind of awesome. You'd think that AWS would wind up offering a solid, awesome solution around this, but no, it's service by service and region by region, which is the exact opposite of what you actually want from a backup provider. Pro tip, no one gives a shit about backups. They care an awful lot about restores, but you only find that one out when it's too late. Oh, hey, here we have WP Engine, which is awesome because they are what hosts Last Week in AWS.com. I checked, it's running on a Google Cloud instance, which is probably at this point devaluing the entire point of the whole sponsorship that AWS took. But hey, at least they got their $5,000 in blood money for getting someone on this website. Yeah, I like it quite a bit, mostly because it runs WordPress. I don't have to think about running WordPress. Don't devalue that. There's some importance to that. And then a few other things as well that basically round this out. Cool. That is the virtual Expo, and more or less winds up rounding out what we saw. What questions can I answer? What other companies can I exhibit for you folks? And of course, what are you thinking about as you look across this vast ecosystem of companies that are just absolutely desperate to sell you something? I will point out, however, that Honeycomb did sponsor my ridiculous nonsense, but not this ridiculous nonsense, because they actually know where their customers are, and it turns out that they are not yet an IBM subsidiary. Okay, checking the chat to see what comments people are saying. I'm sure someone is typing extraordinarily frantically, which good for them. Good, good, good. I'm sort of figure we're another year or two from having booths here that are AWS service teams that have then like competitive shit talking statements about other AWS service teams, because as Amazon continues to devour the entire enterprise tech world, we learn an awful lot, and it continues to evolve things in different ways, I guess. And we're learning how Amazon thinks about businesses and how they think about their customers / competitors / lunch. I mean, reInvent kicks off with a giant chicken wing eating contest, but no AWS employees participate because they're too busy drooling over the entire expo hall. Someone just, and Stanley just said Duckbill Group, an IBM company, and I'm about to do a spit take despite not drinking anything. And that is kind of impressive in its own right. All right, if we have no further questions or comments, oh yeah, I missed Crowdstrike earlier. Crowdstrike, what do? They make drones, and no, you will never convince me otherwise. That is called a great name aimed at the wrong problem. And the right problem is probably not a crowd, but let's not go down that path. Oh, here we have Fastly. Fastly's awesome because they went down earlier this year and taught everyone what a Fastly was. And like, wow, that sure is a lot of companies I didn't expect to be Fastly customers. Like, Amazon.com. They would have used CloudFront, except Amazon.com has they bias for action. They also bias for, using tools that don't suck. Let's see, anything else in here? Hitachi. I don't know what Vantera is, but it's almost certainly not the sex toy division. Good, good, good. Wait, Elasticsearch sponsored? Did they? No. Okay, no, they did not. Okay, good, good, good. Yeah, Elasticsearch sponsored some things, but not other things. I did see the booth there. There was also a Tableau booth that was surprisingly big. That's basically the consolation prize for sorry we stole your CEO. Have a booth at reInvent. Tableau, of course, dares to answer the question, what if QuickSight didn't completely suck? Yeah, did I go over GithUb? That one's funny, but it makes sense. Yeah. I think that, yeah, I talked about GithUb a little bit and that everyone knows what it is. They're hemorrhaging out a lot of their executives because, they're becoming ever more Microsofty by the day. I'm waiting for the big glaring deploy to Azure button. I used to have a lot of respect for Azure, and then it turned out that Azure has zero respect for the security of its customers. And there was a vulnerability researcher cavorting in the control plane that Azure didn't realize until the vulnerability researcher told them about it. And that, I can't really describe to you just how big of a problem that thing is. All right, one more check for questions over here. We've covered the vast majority of these, and everything else is things I've never heard of, which means the jokes are not that funny. And let's be clear, I also don't necessarily want to wind up punching down unless I'm being extraordinarily intentional about it. Cool. Yeah, the QuickSight would be the landing zone for when Tableau people. Oh, QuickSight would be the landing zone for when Tableau people get really tired of Salesforce nonsense. Yeah, but say what you will about Tableau, that shit works. Yeah, Red Hat doesn't have the IBM warning. I know. Isn't that great? It's because they wound up negotiating well. Like, I'm sure it blew $8 billion off of the acquisition price they could have gotten, but you're not putting an IBM logo in our label. All right, that's going to cost you. No, it's cool. That's worth it. All right. Well, of course, now they're talking about Kubernetes adoption. We almost went this far in the entire nature walk without seeing that Kubernetes beast. Another company we didn't see as well is Cisco. If you've ever seen Star Wars, you can picture the Sarlacc, where it devours its prey / acquires companies and then digests them painfully over the next 1,000 years. That's what Cisco does. They got stuck in amber decades ago, and now they're acquiring otherwise fantastic companies like Epsagon. I was a paying customer of Epsagon. As soon as that acquisition was announced, I congratulated both of the founders. They're great people. And then I closed my Epsagon account because I don't have the heart to stick around and watch Cisco absolutely ruin that shit. Because have you ever seen a company get acquired by Cisco and then become better as a result? That's rhetorical because no, of course you haven't. If someone had ever seen that, they would have said, oh yeah, what about this? And I would have stopped making that observation 10 years ago. But here we are. This has been the reInvent Nature Walk through the virtual expo. Thank you all for joining me and the rest of the Quinnvent ridiculous nonsense. Thanks again to Honeycomb for sponsoring this and actually showing what it means to understand/give a shit about what is happening in production. Because the most common answer to things breaking is lol, I don't know. And that is sort of the state of the art for a lot of monitoring companies rebadging as observabilities with their bullshit about pillars and the rest. If I actually gave a shit about what happened in production, and because I don't have a production environment, I assure you I don't, but if I did, Honeycomb would be the obvious answer. And I've been saying that since long before they sponsored my nonsense, and I will be saying it long after someone in their marketing department watches the replay of this video, realizes exactly what kind of shit comes out of my mouth, immediately cancels the contract, and never again deals with me. Thank you all. This has been sponsored by our friends at Honeycomb. I deeply appreciate what they've done for me, and wait, they're here?